What's that saying? It's who you know, not what you know. 8:52. Let's go to the KUAM News Zoom room where we have Attorney General Leevin Camacho standing by. Good morning, AG.
Good morning, Chris.
Well, I guess we'll just start. We get right into it with the CERCLA lawsuit. So we're suing the Navy for their it's their dump, and this was kind of a long shot to get heard by the Supreme Court. So I guess how surprised were you and pleased that they decided to take on this case?
We're extremely pleased. I got to say, you hit the nail on the head. It was a long shot. I think we pointed out less than 1% of cases that are where they ask for Supreme Court review are granted. So, but this is a matter of pretty huge significance for us on the island. When I was on with Sabrina a week or two ago, and I did my homework to let you know the circuit splits. These are the kinds of cases they want to take where they can resolve inconsistent application of law. So just for your awareness, there was a split between 2nd, 3rd, 7th, 9th, and DC. And looking at the map of the circuits, you kind of start with the 1st district being Northeast and you work your way out west, with the only exception being 5th Circuit. So 2nd Circuit would be New York, Vermont, Connecticut, 3rd Circuit, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware. We can get into it, but that's kind of geographically how the issues were split on whether or not a Clean Water Act consent decree triggers your time to file a CERCLA case. And then the 6th Circuit was the other split, whether or not, because we entered into a consent decree in a settlement agreement, but then they also reserved the opportunity to sue us in the future again. So there was this question whether or not that truly is a settlement, or because there's the opportunity to go back into court. It's not final. And that was a split between the 6th and 7th circuits and the DC circuit. So we're extremely excited. We're gonna have to talk now. We're set for arguments in April, maybe mid to late April. That's what we're looking at now. But the tough road is still ahead. We still have to brief the issue and we still have to win if we want to pursue our case against the Navy and to collect their share of cleaning up ORDON. We're estimating $160 million, of which to date the Navy hasn't paid anything.
Who's going to argue the case for us?
So we have a team out of Houston, Texas, Kelly Dry, and they've been handling it from the filing under Attorney General Barrett Anderson in 2017, I believe. I was sworn in 2019, and I came on just after the district court, trial court denied a motion to dismiss, and then it was up on appeal, and now we're at the Supreme Court stage. So they've been really excellent with us. They have appellate specialists, so we'll talk to them within the next few weeks and decide who's going to argue the case. And I know that they're excited too, because arguing before the Supreme Court is a huge deal for any lawyer. You dream about these types of moments, but the Supreme Court, because of COVID, has been doing everything virtually. So it's unclear. I think the January sessions are being held via Zoom as well. So it's not clear whether or not in April it'll actually be in DC or if it'll be a virtual type of hearing. And I think they do instantaneous streaming, so we can make sure we provide that to you if that's the case.
It's pretty interesting that you say that the Supreme Court only takes about 1% of the cases that are trying to get into it. And within the last year, we've had 2 cases.
We've had 2 that we've requested. The plebiscite case was one, and this case is the other one. And the plebiscite, it's a very good example. The difference is there's no circuit split when it comes to the right to vote. And the 9th Circuit is basically held in both the NMI case and in our case that plebiscite or voting for in the NMI was restraints on land alienation, and here it was participating in a plebiscite, restricting it to certain groups violates the 15th Amendment. So that's what's a little bit unique about our case. Yes, it's a matter of great importance. Both of them are significant and of great importance, but in one area we have the circuit split, and that made it much more likely the Supreme Court would accept.
Can you take us into so what do we do now? It was accepted. Now we got to file briefs.
That's correct. So the first briefing was whether or not the court will accept it, and the court has said yes. I believe we have about 30 days to file our opening brief on the legal issues and try to convince the court that we should win. The Department of Justice will then file an opposition brief. We'll be able to file a reply brief, and I think all of that should be completed by March, and then we'll have oral argument again, and it's anticipated to be either mid or late April.
Okay. We also wanted to ask you about some of the things that have come out of your office. condemning, for example, the actions and the attacks in the U.S. Capitol. You joined.
Yeah, it was. I actually was on a call with AGs on some litigation that morning, 5 a.m. And I think in the middle of that, it was a Wednesday because the special election that just happened in Georgia, maybe Thursday, just happened in Georgia, and kind of watching what's going on there. And you kind of see something go out. Oh, they've recessed Congress for the Electoral College because there's an attack on the Capitol. And we're living in a pretty hyper-partisan world right now. And I will say, trivia, we're the only attorney general in the country that is statutorily prohibited from declaring a public a party. So we're in AG's office, and I guess the idealism is that no matter who is the governor or who is in control of the legislature, balls are balls and strikes are strikes, and you're going to call it how you see it, and require everyone. But the AG community is not immune to that, and I think there were some cases leading up to the Electoral College vote where you saw a fracture. So I think it was very telling that 50 attorneys general signed off on this letter. It had wide bipartisan support condemning the attack. And it makes sense because we're all law enforcement and we want to support our law enforcement folks. So it also has probably resulted in a lot of misspelling of the word capital. I know I have to double check whether or not it's capital with an A or an O. But yeah, I think, so we had 50 AGs, 47 states, 3 territories. So only 6 jurisdictions did not sign on to the letter. 2 of them are being Puerto Rico and American Samoa, and that might just be more logistical than anything. But people have been pointing out, well, how come the 4 states didn't sign off on it? And it's going to make things very interesting as we move forward to in-person meetings with the other AGs. But yeah, widespread bipartisan support condemning it and working with law enforcement.
Yeah. Well, speaking of widespread, we just had on the Port Authority of Guam General Manager talking about drugs at the port. We had on the FSM Consul General talking about drugs in the FSM community, and earlier, I think it was last week, the Chief of Police alarmed about the increasing number of drug use and possibly even drug dealing within the FSM community. And Paul Tapau, just on this week, talking about the war on drugs that we seem to be and have been losing. And one thing I noticed with the indictments that have been coming down and released through the Attorney General's office, there's a lot of complaints and charges related to possession. And I guess I just want to hear it, your perspective on this pandemic with drugs on Guam. We recognize, and I think I've been on so many times, that drugs are the biggest problem, and ICE in particular is the biggest problem facing our island, and it's probably been made worse by the pandemic. And as an office, and we are making sure that our prosecutors are aware of kind of the big time dealers and making sure that we hold those folks accountable. But then a lot of the cases that we've charged out recently have but they've been simple possession cases. And that's where you have to strike a balance between understanding that you're not going to just be able to throw everyone with an addiction issue into prison. And the adult drug court program they assist folks in dealing with mental health issues, substance abuse issues. As an office, I think we want to continue to promote that and to, I came from the defense world, right? And I remember years ago when I wasn't in this position, seeing folks who got caught with a pipe and there was potential jail time, and, kind of talking to our prosecutors and saying, guys, this is because he had a pipe and a baggie, he's a drug dealer, and just saying, is there anything else that you guys have to believe? So, we have to be able to use our discretion to spot those who are bringing in large amounts of drugs into the island and who are the true threats to our island, and those who are just struggling with substance abuse. But the bulk of the cases that we filed have been, I don't want to say routine, but folks who really are more
street level
addiction issues than high level drug dealers.
It just seems like it's just a vicious cycle because like you say, you're dealing with addiction issues, but yet we don't seem to have enough resources and programs to help people who have these addiction problems. So I
absolutely agree with you on that, Sabrina. I mean, I think it's about prioritizing and reevaluating the criminal justice system. I think we have the community right now is very much throw everyone in jail. And I think drugs might be the one area where people understand there are other underlying issues that people may be struggling with, and especially again with the pandemic happening. I do want to point out that kind of one bill or one law that was signed last year that's going to help, I hope, is the requirement that shippers submit their manifests ahead of time. I believe Senator Torres was the author of that bill. And that's something that our federal law enforcement partners and local law enforcement partners have been talking about, there being a gap where people were importing drugs because we don't know what is supposed to be on these boats ahead of time. But that was changed, and I believe the requirement is now that they send their manifests and we get it so we can evaluate and do a threat assessment. Just to give you an update on HIDA, they weren't able to meet and review our petition last year, but we've been informed that they will be meeting in early 2021, and we're hoping to get some positive news and to bring more resources to the island when it comes to intercepting and fighting the importation of drugs, because that's really, we are an island, so people aren't manufacturing it here. It's coming in through the mail, it's coming in through our ports, and we need to be able to spend more resources at the front end to stop it from coming into the island. Yeah. And then kind of what you're pointing out, help folks deal with addiction issues and mental health issues.
Well, while we're on the subject of the port, I just wanted to maybe if you could clarify, because I know this was a case that your office prosecuted, but if someone is convicted of official misconduct as a misdemeanor, how does that affect their employment eligibility for the government of Guam? And just speaking specifically about the Frankie Rosalind case that your office prosecuted, and are you able to secure that conviction? Official misconduct is a misdemeanor. And so we found out he's back at the port, so I don't know if you just know offhand what the law is, or...
I think, Chris, it's going to depend on the type of job that you're applying for. I mean, there will be specific requirements for law enforcement. Will have different requirements. Being licensed as an attorney you'll have different requirements. So I can't speak generally about whether or not a official misconduct charge would disqualify you from all government of Guam employment. But we can look into that, and I can hopefully get you an answer by today.
Okay. And back on the drugs issue, because there's something that came out of your office regarding the opioid situation, and this letter with other attorneys general, right, to the FDA. I know the opioid situation, that is something that Senator Tulina Nelson has been on the front line with, and she just reintroduced a bill regarding the opioid situation.
Yeah, we're monitoring the bill. I know that we're glad that there's someone that Senator Nelson is wanting to take this on as an issue. As we've been dealing with our litigation against Purdue Pharmaceuticals for OxyContin, we've kind of now gotten, I think, all the people in the room to talk about where there may be gaps and where there may be opportunity for potential improvements. And I'll mention one is naloxone is kind of an it'll help you if you have an overdose, right? And a lot of jurisdictions have made it so that you don't need a prescription to get naloxone. And I know talking to some of the folks out here, they're saying, okay, well, maybe that will be a behind the counter type of situation where if you have a family member who's worried that someone may suffer from an overdose of opioids, rather than having them go to the hospital and potentially die on the way there, we allow for pharmacists to dispense naloxone. So there's a lot of opportunity there. I think e-prescriptions is another area where we can hopefully raise that. Right now, our law requires written prescriptions, which sounds great, but it also leaves open the opportunity for fraud and for forged prescriptions for opioids in particular. So I'm looking forward to working with Senator Nelson on these issues.
AG, are we at because I guess the way you would measure how bad we're doing with the opioids is through the arrests and what we see on the Magis, but I don't really see a lot of those types of arrests being made. So how do you kind of gauge where we're at as a community with the opioids? Because I know people are abusing them. I know it's a problem, but I just don't see it translated in the court cases. Or do you, or am I just missing it?
Well, that's the thing about opioids, Chris. You can legally be getting prescriptions for opioids and you're not committing a crime, right? So you might have addiction issues with opioids and substance abuse issues, but you're doing everything, quote unquote, by the book. So you don't realize the problem. We've been looking at, we have maybe 1 to 2 overdose deaths per year on the island, and I think that's still pretty significant, and we don't talk about it enough. But we've been able to track down data of the number of times that they have to administer naloxone to assist someone who may be having an overdose reaction to opioids. And those numbers are pretty high. So it's not that we don't have a problem. It's just right now we're not seeing the deaths that you're seeing in the States, thankfully. But it doesn't necessarily mean we don't have an opioid problem. I know Guam Behavioral just started an inpatient treatment center in particular for those who are dealing with opioids. And I want to say they had anywhere between 10 to 30 people that were there specifically for opioid addiction issues.
All right.
What about that Facebook lawsuit? I know Jason wanted to ask about that.
It's moving on. I know last week, I guess with WhatsApp, they put out the privacy change, which I guess has been the case for a while, that your WhatsApp messages are now going to be crossed over for sharing with Facebook for marketing purposes and for collection of data. I guess I can't promote any particular messaging app, but I will say that there is one that's out there that's a competitor that put together. Forbes magazine put out an infographic showing what data different messaging apps collect about you as you use it. And on one end was one competitor, WhatsApp, and on the other end was Facebook Messenger. And it's actually terrifying to see. Not terrifying, it's just very eye-opening to see just how much data they are collecting on you unknowingly. And when you get even as a lawyer, I don't read through the fine print. And I hate to say, well, when I'm the consumer, when we get documents to review,
you're like, scroll all the way to the bottom, agree.
I accept, or review your iTunes, not now, remind me tomorrow.
Yeah. Jason?
Yeah, AG, if you could just maybe put it into very succinct English, just because for people that may not really be able to grasp the gravity of the mounting action that's now being taken against the companies that we would be considered big tech, because we really haven't seen this kind of thing in maybe 23 years since the last time when the Department of Justice actually went after Microsoft for saying, you guys may have too much power, too much money, too much control, not over just the tech industry, but you're reaching out to other areas of commerce, into you're basically larger and more resourceful and more powerful than government right now. So possibly Facebook, possibly Amazon has been called upon to be broken up, and so what does this mean for the average consumer?
I mean, what you are buying and selling, the currency now is data, and that's what all these ads. And I talk to people. Jen will be talking to me. She's like, "Wow, I was thinking about something, and then I got an ad show up in my Facebook feed, right?" And so it's just, I don't think people realize how targeted. They take data from your WhatsApp, they take data from your Facebook, they see what you're liking, what you're commenting on, and they build a profile, and then they are able to sell that to folks and to predict your behavior. So with Facebook, what we're talking about, I think specifically for Facebook, is that specific to WhatsApp, they purchased WhatsApp, they purchased Instagram to kind of gather or to expand their, not one, to eliminate competition, perceived competition, but two, to expand the ways that they collect data from users that they can then sell to and market to advertisers. So I want to say that Instagram just revamped their messaging app, and it might look great, but just understand there's a purpose for that. They are trying to find ways to get more data and to see and to use what you're talking about to sell that data to companies. So on the business side, it's great because you can run very targeted ads, but from a consumer perspective, it's a little bit worrisome because most people don't have any idea just how much data is out there and how much they're collecting and selling.
Yeah, AG, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time there was this much traction about possibly breaking up a really big company is when, or one or more companies, is when AT&T was kind of like divested, for lack of a better term, into all those, like from Ma Bell into all like the little baby bills.
I know AT&T was the big one, Jason, but maybe I knew you in my former life, but was Internet Explorer, right? And no one uses Internet Explorer anymore, but it just goes to show that was the dominant browser for how many years. And you look at why. It wasn't because the product was great. It's because Microsoft was forcing companies to pre-install it. Right. It came pre-installed with every Windows machine. It was the default web browser. You didn't really have a choice. And that's the similar arguments we're making, shifting gears to Google, that Google now enters into all these agreements where if you're using Safari, all your iPhones, Androids are pre-installed with Google as the default search engine. But there's a value to that because they're able to sell ads and to,
Right, yeah.
And if I could
increase
just wrap
their
up this interview,
revenues.
guys, there was one time, speaking of many years ago, there was a young developer named Jason Salas way back at ITNE in 1996 who had the very distinct pleasure of being able to mentor a college intern whose name was Leevin Camacho, and the two of those gentlemen were actually building web pages for
That's right.
Microsoft Internet
Yeah,
Explorer
just
back
the
then. So.
JavaScript rollover, right? And I think
Oh,
Jason,
God.
that was the year that we started encoding MP3s using DOS. You know, if you guys can think back and
Fun
I
times,
think
man.
Jason, you were encoding the Spice Girls. The 2 becomes 1 might have been the time.
You're not even lying.
Those 1.44 floppy disks. So.
Jason's always been a Spice Girls kind of guy. Well, thanks.
But it's
Before
a big deal, and
yeah.
I think just moving forward, you know, it's the internet is like oxygen now, right? We want always looking at our phones, always online. We can't. You have to set rules of the family, no looking at your phone or devices when you're sitting for dinner. But there is a cost for all that convenience, and that's going to be your privacy and lack of control over it.
Well, thanks, Leevin. We're gonna let you go before Jason turns us into tech talk.
Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.
You too.
And
Safe.
safe travels for the guard that are going out for the inauguration. I really hope that things are going to be calm this time around.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk, right? There's a lot of buzz about armed protests and riots and at each of the state's capitals. Are you guys getting any advisories on that, AG?
We are getting them, and we, you know, I think the FBI has. I mentioned the Capitol. FBI is collecting tips if you know of a threat or potential criminal activity. And Monday being Martin Luther King Jr. Day, right? As we wrap this up, there was one quote that's been circulating. You know, in the end, it's not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends that we remember. And it's just telling now in these times, right? People who are all over social media now, or even some media folks, you know, they're kind of quiet now, and you wonder. Well, you have an opportunity now to talk about, and if 50 AGs can come out and denounce what happened at the Capitol, everyone it should be pretty easy, right?
Yeah. Thanks, AG.
But thank you, Chris and
Yeah.
Sabrina and Jason.
Okay.
All right. Stay
good
safe.
one.
See ya.
Thank you.
And since we're talking about the Guard, we'll just mosey
perfect
on
segue.
over. Right now, is that Mark Scott, the Guam Guard PIO? I know we just had him on the other day, but we sent what 20 soldiers out
30?
to the 30.
It was up to 30?
Yeah, Mark, was it how many?